What would you do if one morning, you walked outside and found strangers marking up your land as if it already belonged to them? The first time I saw the surveyor setting up equipment near the edge of my farm, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was a utility inspection or some kind of county assessment, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I saw the orange flags. Small, fluttering in the wind, they dotted my fields like a warning sign I didn't yet understand. That was the moment my stomach twisted, a gut feeling telling me that something wasn't right. I should have listened to it. My name is Ethan, and this farm isn't just where I live, it's my family's legacy. My grandfather bought this land when it was nothing but wild overgrowth, worked his hands raw turning it into something that could sustain a family. Over 60 years of hard work, sweat, and sacrifice were poured into these fields, and when my father passed it down to me, I swore I would protect it. But the homeowners association had other plans. The letter arrived a few days later. Crisp, professional, and full of legal jargon, it informed me that the HOA would be constructing an essential access road through my property to connect the main highway to a new housing development. They framed it as a necessity for the betterment of the community. But in reality, this road wasn't for the town, it was for the developers. I read the letter again and again, my blood pressure rising with every word. The road would cut straight through my fields, bulldoze my crops, and tear my property in half, leaving me with 2 useless pieces of land. And just like that, everything I had spent my life protecting was being treated as a minor inconvenience. At the bottom of the letter, there was a single paragraph about fair compensation. The amount they offered was an insult, barely enough to cover a fraction of my losses. I wasn't just losing land, I was losing my livelihood, my history, my identity. And the worst part? They didn't ask. They just assumed I would roll over and accept it. I wasn't going to. Fueled by anger, I grabbed my truck keys and drove straight to the HOA office. I didn't know exactly what I planned to say, but I knew one thing: they were about to hear me loud and clear. The receptionist barely looked up when I stormed into the HOA office, her nails clicking against the keyboard as if my presence was nothing more than an inconvenience. I didn't care. I planted my hands on the counter, swallowing my frustration just enough to keep my voice steady. I need to speak with someone in charge. Now. She exhaled through her nose, finally glancing up with the kind of expression that told me she dealt with troublemakers like me all the time. What's this about? I clenched my jaw. The road. The one they're trying to plow through my farm. I got a letter, and I want answers. Her lips twitched like she was holding back a sigh. You'll need to make an appointment. The board only meets once a month. Once a month. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're telling me I have to wait weeks just to talk to someone? She slid a form across the counter. Fill this out. Someone will get back to you. I snatched the paper, knowing damn well I wasn't going to waste my time with it. They were playing a game, stalling, hoping I'd accept their decision without a fight. Not a chance. The moment I got back to my truck, I called my lawyer, Dave Miller. He wasn't surprised. Eminent domain laws are tricky, he explained. If they can argue it benefits the community, they have legal grounds. But if we can prove the road isn't essential or that they're lowballing you on compensation, we have a chance to fight it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with stacks of documents, researching every zoning law I could get my hands on. I attended town hall meetings, spoke with neighbors, and found something that made my stomach churn: this road wasn't for public use. It was designed to provide private access to a luxury housing development the HOA had been quietly pushing through. They weren't just taking my land, they were manipulating local laws to benefit themselves. The next morning, I walked out to my fields and found even more survey markers. A man in an orange vest stood nearby, scribbling notes on a clipboard like he owned the place. Hey! I called out, striding toward him. He barely glanced up. "You should probably move that barn soon," he said, nodding toward my family's old structure in the middle of the land. Something snapped inside me. "Move my barn?" I stepped closer, my voice like steel. "You don't even have permission to be here." The surveyor smirked, completely unfazed. "We're just doing our job." I wanted to punch that smug look off his face, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. I needed a plan, not an outburst. That night, I gathered as many neighbors as I could in my living room. Some were skeptical, others scared. After all, the HOA had deep pockets and a reputation for getting what they wanted. But as I laid out maps, legal documents, and what I'd discovered about their backdoor dealings, the doubt in their eyes slowly turned into something else: anger. We needed to go public. I reached out to Sarah Collins, a journalist from the local paper, and laid everything out for her. Within a day, an article appeared with the headline, "HOA Targets Family Farm for Profit-Driven Project." It sent shockwaves through the community. But just as I felt a glimmer of hope, the HOA struck back. 2 days later, flyers started appearing on doorsteps across town. They claimed I was a hypocrite, secretly planning to sell part of my land to a corporate developer. The bold, black letters twisted my stomach. "Ethan is fighting to protect his land? Or fighting for a better price? ****. It was a blatant lie. The HOA was trying to turn the town against me, hoping to paint me as the villain while they played the role of concerned community leaders. Some people believed them. I could feel it in the way they avoided eye contact at the feed store, in the hesitant nods instead of full conversations. The HOA knew exactly what they were doing, isolating me, making me look like the problem. But I wasn't backing down. I called another meeting, this time in a public space. I showed the crowd bank records proving I hadn't made any deals. I reminded them that this wasn't just about me. If the HOA could do this to my farm, what was stopping them from doing it to someone else? Slowly, I saw the tide shift. The community wasn't just angry anymore. They were furious. And that's when the HOA made their next move. That night, I woke up to the sound of rustling outside. Grabbing a flashlight, I slipped out the back door and crept toward the barn, my pulse pounding. Shadows moved near the survey markers. 2 men crouched, pulling up the flags and replacing them with new ones, shifting the boundaries inch by inch. I clicked on the flashlight. The beam caught them mid-act. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" They froze. One stammered something about adjusting boundaries, but I wasn't buying it. "Get off my property," I barked, stepping closer. They scrambled to their truck and sped off, but not before I caught sight of the HOA logo printed on their shirts. The next morning, I filed a police report and handed over my security footage to my lawyer. I wasn't just fighting back now. I was going to expose every dirty trick they pulled. But the HOA wasn't done yet. They were getting desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. The morning after I caught the HOA's hired men sneaking onto my land, I half expected them to retaliate. What I didn't expect was how fast they would escalate. When I stepped onto my porch, sipping my first cup of coffee, my stomach dropped. A line of heavy machinery, bulldozers, graders, and trucks, was parked along the edge of my property. And standing in front of them, clipboard in hand, was Rick, the HOA's mouthpiece, smirking like he had already won. I set down my coffee so hard the cup nearly cracked and marched straight toward him. "You've got no right to be here," I said, my voice steady despite the anger boiling beneath the surface. Rick barely blinked. "Pre-construction survey," he replied smoothly. "Totally legal. Like hell it is. The injunction isn't even settled yet." He gave a slow, deliberate shrug. "These things take time, but we have permits to assess the land. You don't want to make this difficult, Ethan." My fists clenched. They were trying to break me, to wear me down until I had no choice but to give in. But if Rick thought I was going to roll over, he had another thing coming. "You set 1 foot past that fence, and I'll have the sheriff down here so fast your head will spin." His smirk faltered for a second before he regained his composure. "Suit yourself," he said, turning on his heel. He signaled the workers to hold off, but I knew this was just a test. A warning. And it meant they were getting desperate. I didn't have time to dwell on it, though, because by that afternoon, another problem arrived, this one delivered right to my mailbox. A thick envelope from the county building inspector's office. When I tore it open, I found a list of citations so ridiculous I almost laughed. Almost. According to the letter, my barn was too tall, violating some newly imposed zoning restriction, one I had never heard of. My tractor was allegedly parked too close to a public road, despite sitting in the same spot it had been for years. And the best one? A noise complaint filed against me for operating heavy equipment at 3 in the morning. I hadn't been outside at 3 in the morning in months. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was the HOA playing dirty. They couldn't get me to cave legally, so they were going to drown me in bureaucracy, tie me up with fines and petty violations until I had no choice but to sell. I grabbed my phone and called Dave. "This is retaliation," I told him, pacing my porch as I filled him in. "They're throwing everything they've got at me." Dave agreed, but what he said next sent my blood pressure skyrocketing. The complaints? They weren't from random neighbors. Every single one had been filed by HOA board members, under fake names. "We can prove it," Dave said. "But it's going to take time to get these thrown out." Time was something I wasn't sure I had. That night, I barely slept. Every noise outside made me jump, every creak of the house set my nerves on edge. I was half convinced I'd find another surprise waiting for me in the morning. And I was right, just not the one I expected. A petition had started circulating through town. A petition supporting the road. I found out when a neighbor, one of the few who had stuck by me, showed up at my door with a flyer. My name was plastered across it in bold, black letters, claiming I was selfishly blocking community progress while secretly trying to negotiate a higher buyout for my land. I read it twice, my hands shaking with fury. "There's no way people are actually buying this," I muttered, but the doubt in my neighbor's eyes told me otherwise. Word was spreading fast. The HOA had convinced people that I was the one being greedy, that I was the one dragging this fight out. And worse, they claimed they had over 200 signatures in support of the road. I knew it was a lie. And I was going to prove it. By midday, I was in the county clerk's office, demanding to see the petition. It took some pushing, but when I finally got my hands on it, I nearly laughed at how sloppy they had been. Names of people who didn't even live in town. Names of people who had passed away. And worst of all, names of real residents who had been tricked into signing something else entirely. Armed with proof, I took the fight straight to the community. That evening, I gathered every supporter I had left and held a public meeting, laying out the truth for everyone to see. I presented the petition, showed them how the HOA had fabricated names, manipulated documents, and used every underhanded trick in the book. "This isn't about a road," I told them. "This is about who actually runs this town, us or the HOA." Murmurs spread through the crowd, and I could see the shift happening. People who had been unsure, who had believed the HOA's lies, were starting to wake up. But I knew Karen and Rick wouldn't take this lying down. And I was right. Because the very next morning, when I walked out to my fields, I saw it. Entire rows of crops, wilted. Blackened. Dead. Someone had poisoned my land. I dropped to my knees, my hands brushing over the shriveled leaves and brittle stalks. The rich green that had once spread across my fields was now nothing more than a graveyard of withered crops. My stomach twisted as I crushed a handful of dead soil between my fingers. This wasn't drought or disease, this was deliberate. Someone had poisoned my land. A wave of fury crashed over me as I scanned the field, searching for any sign of who had done this. Then I spotted them, tire tracks. Fresh ones, leading from the dirt road straight into my property. Someone had driven in during the night, sprayed whatever toxic chemicals they used, and slipped away like a coward. I stormed back to the house, grabbed my phone, and called the sheriff's office. Deputy Mark Reynolds answered, his voice calm as always, but I could hear the tension when I told him what had happened. "That's a serious accusation, Ethan," he said. "Do you have any proof?" I did one better. I had cameras. After everything the HOA had pulled, I had installed security cameras around the farm. I rushed to my laptop, heart hammering as I scrolled through the footage from the night before. And there it was, clear as day. A pickup truck creeping onto my land just past midnight. Two figures, dressed in dark clothing, slipping out and spraying something from large containers. I zoomed in, my jaw tightening. The truck's door bore a company logo. It wasn't just some random act of vandalism. This was planned. Paid for. By the HOA. I sent the footage straight to Dave, who called me the moment he saw it. "Ethan, this is exactly what we needed. This is criminal damage to private property. If we can connect it back to Rick or anyone on the HOA board, this case won't just be civil anymore, it'll be criminal." That was what I wanted. I wanted them in handcuffs. That afternoon, Deputy Reynolds arrived to take my statement. He watched the footage in silence before shaking his head. "Damn," he muttered. "They're getting bold." I clenched my fists. "They're getting desperate." He exhaled sharply. "I'll launch an investigation, but you know they're going to lawyer up the second I start poking around. Be ready for that." I was more than ready. But before the sheriff could even finish his initial report, the HOA struck again, this time in broad daylight. A black SUV pulled up to my driveway just as I was repairing a fence near the property line. I straightened, wiping sweat from my brow as the door opened and Rick stepped out, wearing a suit and that same smug look I was getting real tired of. "Ethan," he said smoothly, as if we were old friends. "I think we've both taken this a little too far, don't you?" I crossed my arms. "That depends. Are you here to confess to poisoning my land, or just to waste my time?" His grin faltered for half a second before he chuckled. "Always so dramatic." He pulled a document from his briefcase and held it out. "I'm here with a final offer. We're willing to increase your compensation. Sign this agreement, and we'll make sure the construction process is painless for you." I snatched the paper, scanning it quickly. The new amount was higher, but still nowhere near enough to make up for what they were trying to take. And buried in the fine print was a waiver, releasing the HOA from any liability regarding past, present, or future damage. They wanted me to sign away my right to sue. I shoved the document back at him. "Take your offer and get the hell off my land." Rick's smile vanished. His mask of politeness slipped, and for the first time, I saw what he really was, a cornered animal, lashing out. "You're making a mistake," he said coldly. "This road is happening whether you like it or not. The only question is how hard you want to make it for yourself." I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. "Is that a threat?" "It's reality." We stared each other down, the heat of the afternoon pressing between us. Then he turned, got back into his SUV, and drove off. I knew what that meant. The HOA was done playing games. The next time they made a move, they wouldn't bother with legal loopholes or weak intimidation tactics. They were coming for me with everything they had. The courtroom was packed. HOA board members sat stiffly in their chairs, their high-priced lawyers whispering furiously among themselves. Across the aisle, I sat next to Dave, my fingers gripping the edge of the table as the judge flipped through the evidence we had presented, documents proving zoning fraud, security footage of trespassers, and most damning of all, the video of the men poisoning my crops, hired by a contractor with direct ties to Rick and the HOA. Rick sat at the front of the room, his usual smugness gone. He knew what was coming. The judge looked up, cleared his throat, and delivered his verdict. The injunction would remain in place, the road project was halted indefinitely, and further investigation into the HOA's fraudulent practices was ordered. I barely heard the rest of the ruling over the rush of relief flooding through me. It was over. I had won. Or at least, I thought I had. The next day, the HOA launched a smear campaign, trying to paint me as a stubborn obstructionist who was preventing progress. They sent out letters, posted on social media, even created a website to expose my supposed selfishness. But it was too late. Because the community had turned against them. Neighbors who had once been silent started sharing their own horror stories about the HOA's corruption. People showed up at board meetings demanding transparency. The local paper ran another story, this time, not just about me, but about dozens of other residents who had been manipulated, overcharged, and bullied by the HOA for years. And then came the final blow. A whistleblower stepped forward, Diane, a former HOA employee. She leaked internal emails proving that the road project had never been about community access. It had always been a scheme to inflate property values for a select few investors. The scandal rocked the HOA. Within weeks, multiple board members resigned in disgrace, including Rick, who vanished from public view. The road project was officially dead. Standing in my fields, looking out over the land I had nearly lost, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known in months. The battle had taken everything out of me, but it had also proven something important. HOAs, no matter how powerful, aren't untouchable. When people stand together, even the biggest bullies can fall. I wasn't just fighting for my farm. I was fighting for everyone who had ever been pushed around, threatened, or silenced. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I had done something that mattered. Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.